Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Empowering Youth Through STEM and Civic Engagement, Tools for Educators in Out-of-School Time Programs. We're really excited to have you here today to learn about some really great professional development opportunities for you and your programs. But to get us started, we have some housekeeping. So if we could go to the next slide. First of all, feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. You can do this by using the Q&A box on the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll be having a Q&A session at the end, but as you think of things, feel free to drop any of your questions into the Q&A box. This webinar is being recorded. It's also being streamed to Facebook and LinkedIn, so if you're viewing from there, welcome. We're happy to have you as well. And a recording of the webinar will be sent out afterward. So if you have to duck out, that's totally fine. When commenting in the chat, please make sure that the message is to all panelists and attendees. This way, everyone can see what you post in the chat. Otherwise, only the panelists or the host can see your message. Next slide. So on today's agenda, we're going to hear from a few amazing programs across the country, and then also from the new initiative from the After School Alliance, the Collective for Youth Empowerment in STEM and Society. You'll hear about a variety of resources that you and your programs can utilize, and then hear about some amazing professional development opportunities that you can take part in. So with that very brief introduction, I'm going to pass it over to Anita Krishnamurthy to talk more about CYESS and to introduce herself.
Great. Thanks so much for setting that up, Leah. And hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here to talk about this new work that we've begun at the After School Alliance. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Anita Krishnamurthy, and I'm the Senior VP for STEM and Youth Engagement at the After School Alliance. I've been leading STEM work here at the Alliance for a long time. And more recently, I stepped into this role as the president of this new initiative that we launched called the Collective for Youth Empowerment in STEM and Society, which is a bit of a mouthful. And so we say CYESS for short. So this brings together the Alliance's long history of supporting after-school STEM and our more recent work, but still quite well-established work with Youth Voice. We believe that young people strengthen our communities and society, but they're too often left out of conversations that impact their lives and shape the future. So CYESS is working to expand opportunities for young people to use their STEM skills so that we can have them at the table for important conversations and discussions about societal challenges and issues that they care about. We believe that equipping and including young leaders in creating change as part of an intergenerational effort will mean a brighter future for all of us. But to make change in today's STEM-driven world, young people not only need a strong grounding in STEM knowledge and skills, but also the agency and the opportunities to engage in issues that matter to them. So CYESS aims to support the integration of STEM and civic engagement into after-school and out-of-school time programs, because it's not only the right thing to do for young people to make room for them at the table and invite them to the table, but because when we empower youth with STEM and invite their fresh perspectives, they will create innovative new solutions and be invested in improving the world around them, often beyond what adults can imagine. So next slide, please. So how does CYESS actually work? We don't run programs ourselves, but our goal is to support and knit together some of the great work that's already happening at the intersection of STEM in out-of-school time, teen leadership, and civic engagement. And you're going to hear from a couple of programs today that are doing some amazing work. What we found was that people were often working in silos and in isolation, either because they were focused on particular issues like climate or AI or tech, or they were geographically isolated, or a host of other reasons that end up leading to a lack of connection. And there was a real hunger to find community and to learn from each other and to share with others. So CYESS is focused on 3 buckets of work as shown on this slide. The first one is to help people find community and build relationships with others doing this kind of work. We have an expert community of practice that meets regularly to foster this, and Leah will talk about more about this in a minute. The second is not only to build up the capacity of the people in our community of practice, but to leverage their expertise and resources and build up the capacity of others in the after-school field, in the larger after-school field, who might want to do all this work so that all young people have equitable chances to build up their content knowledge as well as learn how to engage productively in change-making in society. And lastly, as a project of the After School Alliance, we're of course very interested in advocating for this type of work so that there are supportive policies and funding available for this programming. We want to gather the proof points for how youth involvement supports not only the young people, but also the impact it has on the communities and the issues being addressed. So the last slide that I have, next slide, please, talks a little bit about our desired impact. So we believe this approach has multiple benefits. We, of course, want to normalize youth being at the table to contribute their perspectives as members of a community with a different lived experience than adults, because we believe that intergenerational approaches are critical to solving our challenges today. And a link to our holistic theory of change should now be in the chat, but let me focus here on what our hopes are for this work. So while the theory of change focuses on what we hope to achieve as a network, what you see on the screen are all the impacts that we hope it'll have on young people. STEM learning won't accelerate if young people don't see STEM as relevant or something they would or can do. Our work is to support more programs, excite young people about STEM by applying it to issues that they care about. And this is especially true for teens who have a lot of option for what they can do with their time. So in our CS work, we tend to focus on ages 13 to 18. And many of the programs in our communities of practice are working with that age range. We know that many young people today care deeply about making the world a better place, but they don't always see STEM as a tool that can serve them in that goal. Whether it's social justice or racial justice or other kinds of issues that they may care very, very deeply about. So for those civically minded youth who think that STEM is not useful for their ambitions, we hope that this approach can show them the utility of STEM knowledge and skills, because in today's world, STEM is an essential tool for developing more civically engaged youth, helping them understand and address issues that matter in their own lives and communities, engaging young people in issues that they care about and working on concrete solutions is a powerful combination that has the power to really excite young people about learning and their role in making the world a better place. And of course, the skills that employers always say they need today are the same skills young people develop when they learn to apply STEM as a tool in the real world. Employers will need candidates who have the ability to contextualize knowledge, ask the right questions, define problems accurately, and apply the right sets of skills to solve them. And these are the very skills young people develop when they learn how to use STEM as a tool to address challenges that they see in their own communities. And when young people build up their STEM literacy and proficiency, they develop these essential skills that employers ask for, like critical thinking and problem solving, to communications and collaborations. And when businesses support initiatives like the programs in our CS community of practice, they'll be more likely to attract socially minded youth who are looking for mission-driven work, which will give employers access to a whole new pool of diverse, smart, creative candidates who might not otherwise have thought of themselves as STEM kids. And by creating opportunities for young people to learn and practice STEM knowledge and skills in the real world, we hope that we can usher in a new generation of young leaders who have the skills and experience they need for lifelong success, regardless of their career paths. So that's a very quick run through of our CS initiative. More information available on our website. And to tell you more about the initiative and the resources and connections we can make for you, Leah, I'm going to turn this back over to you so you can tell them about all the amazing work that you're leading with our CS work.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anita. Next slide. next slide after that. So I'm going to dive into some of the resources that thus far CES has pulled together for folks in the field, speaking to a lot of what Anita was talking about of the purpose of CES. So one of the first major initiatives that CES took on was a landscape of the field. And when I say the field, I'm talking about out-of-school time programs that operate at the intersection of youth empowerment or teen empowerment, STEM, and civic engagement. And part of the reason why we wanted to do this was to see what programs already existed, and then coordinate across those programs to figure out best practices for doing this kind of work. And from that initial landscape survey, we came out with a report on kind of the reasons why programs are doing this kind of work across the country and some of their best practices to do that as well. However, we realized that our initial sample was a small reflection of the number of programs doing this kind of work nationally. And so part of this work is that we have an ongoing survey to the field. So if you're doing this kind of work, we really encourage you to submit about your program on our website, and a link to that survey should be in the chat. Which then when you share about your program, it updates on a community dashboard. So as more programs share about the amazing work that they're doing, we can see trends that update on this dashboard that's available to everyone. And again, links to both the dashboard and the survey are in the chat. And then you can also view the initial report of the landscape that we took to start all of this work. Next slide. So another big undertaking that we've taken on is a resource database focused on tools for doing work at the intersection of STEM, civic engagement, and youth empowerment. This is kind of the bread and butter of what is out there in terms of information to get started if this kind of programming is interesting to you and something that you want to start implementing in your program. And what this database on our website holds is professional development, curriculum, and some research that you can explore to integrate into your programming. And it kind of touches upon all levels of folks being in this space. So if you're just starting, if you're just thinking about it, or if you're already doing a lot of STEM civic engagement and youth empowerment work in your program, there are still resources available to help you strengthen and expand the kind of work that you're doing. Some benefits of the resource database is that you can filter it based off of what kind of resource you're looking at. So professional development, curriculum, research, like I said, but you can also filter based on the subtype, or the focus area. So STEM, civic engagement, youth empowerment. If you're looking for civic engagement programming that integrates STEM, you can filter by those two things to see resources that operate on the intersection of those two focus areas. And then finally, after some conversations with a variety of partners, we thought that it was really important to also take the resources in our resource database and make sure that they were cross-listed with the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well. So if you're looking for programming that relates to one of those Sustainable Development Goals, you can search resources based on that specific goal or combination of goals that you're interested in doing programming on. And all that can be found at cyess.org/resources. And it's freely available to anyone and everyone who's interested in exploring it. Next slide. So Anita touched on this in the introduction as well, but one of the other elements that of CYESS that we run is our community of practice. This is a group of about 40 organizations and 70 individuals that meet monthly to talk about the kind of work that they're doing and get feedback from their peers on ways to improve and strengthen this kind of work. There's a link now to the community of practice in the chat. The community of practice is an open group. So if you are interested in joining, you reach out to me and my email will be on a slide in 2 slides from now. But this has really become a workshop space for folks to bring problems, to bring questions that they're interested in exploring, and to really dive in to things like AI in education and how that impacts the programming that we're doing. And really talk about it as a community and how it impacts out of school time programming, but also STEM programming, civic engagement, and youth empowerment as well. Next slide. And one of the benefits of being a member of our community of practice are our partner spotlights as well. We really think that it's important to highlight exemplars of folks in the field doing this kind of work. And we have spotlights and are working on spotlights for all of our community of practice members. You can find that at cs.org/project/CS partner blogs. The link is also in the chat and then on this slide as well. And currently we have about 15 program spotlights. So if you're interested in the kinds of programming that our community of practice members are doing, we dive in deep to the amazing initiatives that already exist out there that we can all learn from. So speaking of community practice members, can we go to the next slide? If you're interested in joining the community of practice, you can email cs@afterschoolalliance.org or email me directly, and I'll put my email in the chat shortly. To learn more about CS in general, go to cs.org, and then all of the initiatives that we are doing are highlighted on our LinkedIn page as well. So that's linkedin.com, Collective for Youth Empowerment in STEM and Society. We really look forward to connecting with you and hearing more about the work that you're doing, because our job is to elevate the amazing work that's already being done in out of school time as it pertains to STEM, youth empowerment, and civic engagement, and make the connections across the field to make this work stronger. So with that said, I'm going to pass it off to one of our amazing community of practice members, and we are going to learn more about Teen Science Café Network. So thank you, Katie.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad everybody's here, and I'm excited to talk about our network. But the next slide, I'll show you. For those of you who haven't heard about what a Teen Science Cafe is, from the outside looking in, these are events that are hosted throughout the year that bring STEM experts and teens together in an informal and fun venue with food and drink. And so it's a very fun program. And the experts share information about STEM topics and about their careers and how they got into those careers and how they use STEM day to day in what they do. The events are designed by teens and they're for a teen audience. And they attract a diverse group of students. Some come because they are interested in that topic, but some come just because it's a fun event to go to. And so in that case, there are kids that come and they're exposed to STEM topics and to experts in their fields and learn about careers that are out there that they didn't even know about beforehand. And we have many examples where kids are excited about STEM and never thought they would be. So next slide. So there are three groups of people who contribute to the success and really sustain this model. And one is the teen leaders. Each site that has a teen cafe has a group of teen leaders who do some of the things that are on the slide. They design the program. It's their voice. It's their questions that are answered through these programs. So that obviously they're the most important. But the adult leader is the person that champions the program at your site. And they really they're the continuity for this program. They sustain the program as the teens grow out and new students come in. And then of course there's the STEM experts, and those are the people that connect what you're doing to the community. It's a wonderful place where the community and those after school programs come together. So next one. Next slide, sorry. So we have programs all over the United States, and we have them with 4-H, we have them I have my list here. Hold on a second. Yeah, the after school, there's so many after school organizations. We have them in libraries, we have museums, aquariums, you name it, nature centers, universities. And they also are happening in very rural places where there aren't very many people, in very dense urban places. So you can imagine that these cafe programs look very different across all of those venues. And there's one thing though that keeps them all connected, and we call them our cafe values. They really are the guiding principles for these kinds of programs. And I think, as you go through them, these events have hands-on activities that are incorporated in them. And you can just read through that. The guidance of the adult leaders is really important. So next slide. The teens obviously are the center of the program, and the Teen Science Café Network has been in existence for over 15 years and has been grant funded over all of that time. So you can imagine all the evaluation that has gone into this model. And the teens are, they see all the careers that are in front of them. They have the opportunity to have leadership skills. They create these programs together in teams. So that in itself is our skills that they're learning of how to work in a team to achieve an end. They gain confidence in speaking in public, and they have those connections with the experts that really can last well out of school. Some go to college and because of experts that they've met through these programs. So we can go on. So what is the network, the Teen Science Café Network? This map isn't actually up to date. We have about 70 sites that are either active or just about to be members. And this fall, we're going to be starting probably about 40 plus sites. So COVID, of course, took a chunk out of what we were doing, but now everything is taking off, and we were so excited about how people are embracing this model, and that it's really a gateway kind of program where kids can learn about STEM and then move on into even more in-depth programs that you might have at your site. It's a place to find out all the possibilities in STEM. So you can go to the next slide. And our mission at the network is to grow this community of practice. It's a free community of practice. And we love this Venn diagram because the teens are in the center. And these are the things that this program can do for your students at your site. It has that piece where it promotes the leadership and empowerment and allowing them to ask their questions. And then through that, it promotes that, of course, the curiosity and the surprise often in these programs of the things that they learn. And then the blue is really, to me, is this huge piece because it connects those experts, anybody that uses STEM, mathematics, STEM in their work, to those students. And a lot can happen because of that. And this is a really wonderful program that allows that connection to be made. We can go next. So the benefits of our network, we're adding them all the time, but the one that I want to talk about the most is the personalized training and mentoring to start a program. If something like this sounds like it could fit at your site, that you can you have teens that would be available, older high school age teens that would be curious and want to start something like this. We have staff members that their job is to train and mentor new sites and help them get started. Just like with any program, there are going to be hurdles that people will have to overcome, and we help you do that. Our training mentoring program, we onboard some people in the fall, and then we also have the springtime onboarding. And our research guides will meet with the new adult leaders, and the cohort meets together as well, because we found that people that start as a group have more, it's supportive to be as part of a group. So we move people through in the fall and the spring. And then as you do your cafes, our guides will check in with you, see how they went, and help you along the way. And after 3 cafes, you graduate. So you can go to the next slide, actually. And this is sort of the outline of what how our training will go. And we have all sorts of professional development materials for you to go through asynchronously, and then as well as meeting with our guides. We have webinars that we offer about a variety of topics and how to market to teens, how to give teens voice in your program, all of these kinds of things that we can offer you to make these programs easier and sustainable. And we'll give you ideas. We have affinity groups that are starting. So say you work in a library, we have all sorts of library people that can meet together and talk about what's special about your kind of setting. So if you are interested in starting something like this, the next slide has my contact information. And we have all sorts of examples of how cafes have been run and how they might fit into what you're doing. And Kristen works with me. She is another person that can answer your questions. We're always here and ready to connect. And I think that's all I have for this.
Thank you so much, Katie. I'm going to pass it over to Kristen.
Hi folks, I'm Kristen Dorfman. I use she, they pronouns, and I am program manager with EarthForce. I am our partnership program manager, so I work with organizations across the US and some in Canada too, around onboarding their organization and integrating EarthForce's materials and frameworks into the work that they're already doing. So EarthForce is the nonprofit who employ me. We have been around for 30 years and we really focus on something that we call environmental action civics. And I'll get into a lot more about what that means here in a bit. But our big things are developing those youth adult partnerships for civic action and systematic change. So we always work with adults. We train formal and non-formal educators, especially that is really my area of work, is working with those folks who are doing out of school time, who are doing summer camps, nature center work, and the like. I do work occasionally with classroom teachers, but I would say that that is the exception rather than the rule. Next slide, please. So when you hear us say environmental action civics, I think of that as a way of teaching and learning that incorporates all of these different things that we ultimately want for our students. So in environmental action civics, when you're working with young folks, you'll be going through a process, which we'll talk about here in a bit too, but it's all about putting youth at the center and putting youth voice at the center as you get into your community, investigate what's going on in your community, and identifying an issue that youth choose, an environmental issue, really digging into the cause and the policies and practices and causes and effects of that issue, and really getting to the root of what it is. And then as a group, choosing a strategy to take action for civic change. And usually that involves something you'll hear us refer to an ask for change. And again, there's that piece of having youth speak to power, which is what we feel is really that crux of civics. And then you'll finish out with celebrating and reflecting with your group of young people on the whole experience. So when we talk about environmental action civics, you'll also hear us say EAC. It is about an experience as a whole that incorporates all of these different aspects. Go to the next slide, please. So this is our EarthForce process. I won't go too in-depth into it because it is a very in-depth thing, but we have our steps 1 through 6 that we use as a framework for educators and adults to engage with youth on an environmental action civics experience, whether that is a project or not. It doesn't always have to be a project, but oftentimes it does. So our process is a tool that, again, educators of any sort can use to build up those skills in their young people to get to a youth-adult partnership. So it's not just about checking off the boxes, okay, I did steps 1 through 6, fabulous. It's really about taking in the whole process as a holistic thing and developing and hitting those skills like leadership, project management in our young people, a lot of those kind of metacognition skills as they're going through this and building up their agency in themselves that a lot of times young people have just never had. I always kind of think about this like when you're in school, you're a kid in school, you don't really get to pick what you have for lunch. You don't really get to pick how you spend a lot of your time. You go to school. And so going through a process like this with your young people where you are sharing that power with them and releasing a lot of the agency that you have as an educator is really revolutionary. And that's what our whole process is about. Next slide, please. Another framework that we have that is a little bit looser, which is why I like to spend a little bit more time on this, is our 3 essential experiences of environmental action civics. These are a bit less prescriptive than, say, the 6 steps, which you would maybe learn about in a really in-depth training. But I find that you can take these 3 essential experiences and apply them to any program, no matter what you're doing, and still get at some of those like key core values of sharing power with young folks in your programming. So our first one is that young people select an issue that is rooted in their lived experience. And again, this is placing that authority with young people to work on something and spend time and dig into and researching something that matters to them in their community. And if you're a place-based educator, this is going to come in there as well, that it addresses something direct and local and salient to young people, that they'll care about it. And I've seen this before, that young people get really stoked about things that they get to pick because it is important to them. Relatedly is that second key experience that young people are co-creating their learning environment, and this is that sharing power piece. So as the adult facilitator, you are letting your young folks share in decision making. As you go through the process in the framework, we dig into specific tools for democratic decision making, different ways that you can make those decisions with your young people. Other pieces of that include sharing responsibility for managing tasks and for really building an environment that young folks are vested in because they helped create it. And that third one is that civic piece, that young folks engage with community power structures and ask for a change. You'll hear us refer to that again, that ask for change. That as they've gone through and really dug into an issue that they care about, that they've gotten to the root of it and figured out the power structures, that systematic effect that is keeping that issue in place, and have decided to ask for a change to decision makers in their community. The other piece that pulls out is that in order to get there, you and your young folks really have to take a look at your community, and we often find folks are doing power mapping, people mapping, empathy mapping to really figure out what is the landscape that we're working in, which is another great skill for young folks to develop as they are becoming young folks, young adults, and eventually engaged citizens as adults. So these 3 things are really what is at the heart of our work. We think of it as almost like an orientation shift away from traditional teaching and learning where a teacher is just delivering information to students. But as we're seeing it, as we share power, as we bring young folks and their voice into the center of our work, that it can really be energizing and revolutionary and lead to long-lasting and sustainable change making. Next slide, please. An example of a student project for folks who are really into that. One of our challenges out in Montana, the RISE Challenge, which is a slightly modified version of the Earth Force process that is focused on natural hazards. These students at the Headwaters Academy chose the issue of drought that they saw was impacting their community and farmers in their community especially. So they were doing all sorts of research looking into what was causing the drought, what was causing the effect for farmers. And they ultimately decided, as a way of mitigating this issue, to build a stupa, which is a big snow cone that as it melts slows that rate and keeps water usable and viable for the rest of the season. And so these students were interacting with loads of folks in their community, from experts at their local university, some educators and rangers in their watershed council and the Forest Service. And then they started talking to some ski clubs to see if the ski clubs could help them build this thing. And at first they got a no from one of the ski clubs, but the other ski club said yes. And so as they're going out and engaging in all these community partnerships, they are learning from these experts, learning about this issue in their community, and then ended up building a stupa with one of their local ski clubs. Next slide, please. So if you are interested in this way of teaching and learning, EarthForce offers a lot of different things for folks who are at pretty much any level of wanting to be engaged. The most probably signature of these options is our core trainings, which is how I met Leah, actually, and how I became involved in CYESS. Our core trainings run about 3 times a year, and those are cohort-based trainings that take place over a few weeks that are several hours long in dedication. And we offer those in 2 styles. If you are a direct educator working directly with youth, we also offer a train the trainer style. So if you are somebody on an institutional level or an organizational level who perhaps you train your staff, or you train volunteers, or you work with teachers in your local district, that might be a better fit for you. And those trainings cover everything from the groundwork of environmental action civics and getting into that mindset as an educator, and also a deep dive into the EarthForce process and all of those steps and activities and frameworks and resources that support getting to environmental action civics outcomes with your young people. A few other things that we offer are our complete resources are online and free. You can find those in the Educator Quick Start, which Lucy has just put in the chat. That is a download link, so you'll fill that out and have the Quick Start sent to you. That is a like a 1-pager that has most of our heaviest frequent flyer resources right there in 1 page. And then after you would have come through our training or gotten interested and maybe reached out to us, we offer ongoing coaching and support for any and all organizations that have worked with us in the past. Even if we haven't heard from you in a few years, or if you're brand new and maybe don't know where to start, my main role is supporting people in integrating this type of teaching into their work wherever they're at, in whichever ways make sense for their teaching and learning contexts. Finally, hey, we also have a community of practice. Those are pretty hot these days. We actually just got ours started in the past few months. And it's hosted in a really nifty platform called Mighty Networks, which is almost, it's like its own website, kind of social media-esque, but not quite. And that's really focused on the need that we saw in folks who had worked with us for more of a peer-to-peer learning style. So we kind of have taken EarthForce out of the center of that equation, because we know that there is so much expertise in our community. And within our community of practice, which is where our online introductory course is housed, that's the EAC 101, which Lucy also put the link in the chat. That online course in the community of practice is free, virtual, self-paced. So anyone can take it and kind of take that first step into getting into the bigger world of EarthForce and environmental action civics. That's about all I have. I'll mention that I'll be at the CYESS gathering in Washington, D.C. here in a few months. I'm located in Richmond, Virginia, so I'm not too far. It's an easy drive for me. And I'll also be at the North American Association for Environmental Education, the NAAE conference, which is going to be in Pittsburgh. So if you're interested in any of those things and want to come find me in person at either of those locations, I'll be there. And you can also email me if you'd like to learn more. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen. So great to learn about all of the amazing resources that EarthForce has. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to try something a little new for this webinar. I know we've been talking at you all for about 40 minutes now, but we've shared a lot of fantastic information, and we'd love to know what has been your biggest takeaway thus far. So to do this, we would love for you to go to menti.com while you're still in this Zoom room, and use the code 570584 8488, which is on the screen as well, and submit what has been your biggest takeaway thus far. And as folks start to populate that information, it should show up on the slide for us all to see what other folks in the room have taken away. So again, go to menti.com and then use the code on the screen to start giving us some of the feedback of your takeaway thus far. And we'll make a word cloud like you're seeing. So we see youth engagement and youth voices, authentic, student-driven. Consequential is staying in the middle of the screen. A live youth voice and youth voices. I'm glad someone's takeaway has been a lot of the resources that folks have shared today. Amazing, and we'll let folks answer for a couple more seconds, and then we'll dive into our Q&A with our speakers for today. Again, glad resources is one of the bigger words there. And then one reminder before we dive right into questions is that if you have any questions that you'd like our speakers to address, please put them in the chat. Or you can put them in the Q&A section as well. Okay, I think we're going to transition over to our Q&A. So if we could have Katie and Kristen back. I'm gonna dive into a question right off of our Mentimeter, which is, we saw what folks' biggest takeaways have been. For Katie, Kristen, Anita, for all of you, what is the biggest takeaway you want people to leave this webinar with?
One thing I want.
Go ahead, Katie.
Sorry. One thing I want is for them to, for you all to know that that having a Teen Science Cafe is very, I won't say it's easy, but it's a program that fits so well in so many different places, and it's something that can lead into work, say with Earth Force or anything else for students that weren't even sure they like science. So this is, I guess that's what I want people to know. It's really a gateway kind of program that will involve a lot of kids because of its nature.
I'm thinking a lot about, Katie, your program especially is about creating physical and emotional and like learning spaces for young folks that they wouldn't have otherwise. And in folks who are using Earth Force frameworks, they're doing the same things, whether it's in their classrooms, within their programs. It's like creating that room, that platform for young folks to explore, to speak to power, to speak with each other. And I think kind of as an adult, it's always been my intention to make those spaces for young people that they wouldn't have otherwise, where it's supportive and safe, and like moving them in directions where they feel that they're valued, right? Because often that just doesn't happen, even in school.
I guess what I'd love for people to take away is that even in STEM programs, we can make space for it to be very youth-driven and learner-centered, because there's an increasing amount of importance being given to youth voice in after-school programs, and STEM and after-school has definitely really taken off over the past decade. And what we're trying to show through our work here with CYESS is that those two things can happen together. And no matter what young people go on to do, right? Like, because so much of the conversation around STEM is often focused on workforce development, which is very important and necessary. And what we hope we're showing people through these two examples, as well as the examples of all the other programs in our community of practice and some of the great work that you're already doing in the field, is that there's an expansive narrative for STEM that goes beyond workforce development. In this world today, we all need to be really STEM literate. It's a modern definition of literacy is not just being able to read and write, it's being able to understand some to STEM in our lives to some extent. And being able to show how it's relevant is one of the most important things that we can do young people, and to remove that sort of sense of fear or intimidation that STEM is only for certain kinds of people or only if you take on certain kinds of work. It's important for all of us to have some base level of understanding. And as in any field, some fraction will go on and pursue that as a profession. But so that's what I really hope that people take away from this webinar today.
Thank you all. A question that's come up a few times in the chat, which I know is a hard one to answer, is there programming that exists for younger children as well? We all focus on the older age groups, and I think part of that, right, is giving young people the space to impact the kind of programming that they're participating in, and how that sharing of power can be a little easier with older students. But do you all have programming that exists for those younger age groups, or know some good resources for folks looking to do this with younger audiences?
Well, that is one challenge that we want to tackle this year, is to see how younger teens, like middle school age teens, can learn some of or gain some of the leadership skills that they're going to need to, as they move into high school, to take on these bigger roles, and have a kind of pipeline so that by the time that the students make it to high school, this whole idea is strong enough that when they get pulled by all the other things that they could do, that also is on the table. It's like, that was pretty cool and I want to keep doing it. So we are definitely looking at how to incorporate younger ages. We don't have that as part of our PD yet, but as I said, this is the year for us to take on that challenge.
Speaking to some of Earth Force's materials, all of our frameworks and activities were written from a 6th grade perspective. So that's our baseline. And when folks come through, we say that with the asterisk that you can adjust up for older students or adjust down for younger students. And when you're working with younger students, it's never been about checking every single box and building up every single skill. So you kind of reel that back and think about, like, okay, what skills would be age appropriate for younger students? And a lot of those versions of inquiry, community inventorying and exploring, talking to folks in their community, learning from local experts in an age appropriate way is something that can always be slotted in for each age group.
Anita, do you have anything you want to add about? Nope. Yeah, I echo everything that Katie and Kristen said about working with younger students. I think that a lot of the core elements of this kind of work can be scaled to that younger age group. It's just how we do that later on that changes for the older age groups as well.
Yeah, and maybe I do have something to say in the end. That's just that, I think with the CYESS initiative, we picked the teen age group for a particular reason, recognizing that it's really important to engage younger children and youth as well. It's just that there's often not as much programming for older youth, and it tends to need to be different. And as Katie said, there's just a lot of different options that teenagers and older youth have for what they can do with their time. And it's also a time when they are sort of exploring their identities in the world and who they want to be in the world. And so to be able to not only talk about STEM content expertise, but also give them the agency and the confidence to say, you can be a change maker if you choose to be, and here are some skills. And we know it takes practice, right? You don't just become an adult activist or sort of somebody as an adult who is wanting to make change, because it's scary and it's not always easy, and it's a skill, and it's a body of knowledge and experience that takes work, and you need practice. And so we figured that after school programs are such a great space and a safe space for young people to try this on for size and see how they like it. So that's the reason, that's why I wanted to explain like why we're focusing on teenagers for this particular initiative. But as Katie and Kristen said, there's many of the resources offered by many of our partners can be adapted. And many of them do work with younger children, as well as sort of many of them go 8 to 18, 6 to 18, with different sort of resources framed at different ages.
I'll quick chime in too that we've seen at EarthForce a body of research saying that as young people have repeated successful and energizing civic experiences from a young age, the more experiences like that they have, the more likely that they will be civically engaged as adults. So yeah, start young, absolutely.
And the same thing goes for STEM education as
Yeah.
well, right? We know that starting STEM in middle school is too late, especially for minority populations of students who need those positive experiences early on to really spark that interest in STEM and STEM learning. So I have a question specifically for Katie. Someone posted in the chat, did I read that the Teen Science Café Network will be having a conference for youth?
Not yet. We are going to have a conference for our members next year. We've just had our first one since COVID this past June. So it is something, again, that's on our list. We're trying to regroup. We've moved now, we're partners with STEM Next Opportunity Fund. So we've moved homes and we're really revving up. So I think it's stay tuned.
Thanks for that. We've talked a lot about the resources that we all offer. What's been a resource or training that has helped you embrace this kind of work? Not throwing softballs here.
I mean, I have been in informal science my whole career for many, many years, and I worked in the museum field. And when the idea of science cafes first emerged back in, early 2000s, it used to be for adults. And the founder of our network, Michelle Hall, said, why can't we do this for teens? And so I've been wound up in science cafes for all ages for 20 years. And also just working in a museum, your contact with the public and with science and technology and STEM, you see the importance and you see the discovery that people make in those kinds of institutions. So that's really what's bolstered me, all of that history with it.
So in a past life before I came to EarthForce, I was an after-school educator, and during my time in that role, our team had a trauma-informed care training, and it was all about learning what trauma is, how young people can be affected by it in any walk of life, and how that might affect how they show up in after-school spaces. And I've carried that with me through all of my adult work and in working with adults too, but it is especially important because you never really know how those young folks are showing up, what's going on at home in their lives, in their communities. And it is so, so, so important to have that safety as an adult to come in with that sort of knowledge.
We don't run a program, Leah, so I'm not going to get into my personal philosophy on this. You can move on to the next question.
Okay. I think we have time for like one or two more. So if there are any questions burning a hole in your pocket, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A so that we can address them for you. But if nothing else comes up, this might be the last one, which is what's some advice you would give to programs at the beginning of their STEM civic engagement youth empowerment journey?
I'll start. Temper your expectations. If you have a few, teens that gather, there will be more. But just don't be discouraged if your program is small in the beginning, and it will build. Just have faith in it.
Relatedly, that a lot of this work takes iteration, especially if you're developing youth leadership. Your young folks aren't going to come in right away and have the capacity and the skills to run their own meeting. That's just not going to happen. So you do have to have a lot of patience and support, especially in those early phases, and have, maybe year 2, year 3, your 3rd or 4th cohort. If you've been with those students from grades 9 to 12, maybe then they'll be ready to run the meeting on their own. But until you help them build those skills and build that capacity, you've got to take it kind of one step at a time.
And I guess I can offer sort of more of a big picture kind of advice, is that you're not alone, right? Like sometimes you do this and you think that you have to solve a lot of problems on your own. And I mean, I've been around the after school world for a while now, and really it's just there's somebody out there who's tried this before or has done this before. And so that is the whole ethos behind our CYESS initiative, is that they people were doing this in isolation and feeling a bit lonely and not having peers that they could troubleshoot ideas and problems with, or learn and share their excitement. And so if you're doing this kind of work, and I'm going to make a shameless plug, right? Like join our community of practice, because that's what it literally is, a group of like-minded people who come together to talk about how we do this kind of work, how we do better at this kind of work, and to, and have a safe space sometimes to say that I don't know how to do this, right? Like, or I'm running into this particular issue and somebody else might have a solution. And if not, you'll have a group of smart people who you can workshop the problem with. So I guess that would be the advice that I would give, is somebody's probably tried it before, and if not, there are others working in similar allied fields who can help you. Leah, do you have anything to add to that, since you run our COP?
No, I think you really covered it, but I think that there's really no wrong place to start with this work, right? We talk about the CS work as work that operates at the intersection of civic engagement, STEM, and youth empowerment. But you can look at any of those spheres as a starting place as well. And you take on one of those and then you bring another one in. Maybe you're doing STEM programming and you really want to embrace youth empowerment as part of that. And then as you bring in kind of that youth leadership element, you start tiptoeing into the civic engagement space with that work. And you can really approach it from any of those avenues to get closer to that overlapping group of the CYESS foundations, right? There, all of this is learning, and we're all learning, and young people are learning, and it's not just about teaching young people to do this work. It's about training adults to help young people do this work, and that's why conversations like this are so important. So thank you all for being here today and learning from us. And we hope to learn from you as well in the future. So if you would like to get in contact with any of us, our emails have been shared in the chat, but will be shared via email after this as well. We'd love to have you as part of the collective. We would love to have you start a Teen Science Cafe or use Earth Force programming in your after school program. But thank you all for being here.